Warning: the information given during this podcast is from professionals discussing situations from our experience and sharing knowledge.
We are not treating or diagnosing what you are personally experiencing, and if you are having difficulties, please seek professional help.
Hello and welcome to
It's Not You.
It's Them.
This series is about getting started
All you need to know about finding, working,
and finishing up with a therapist.
and we are back.
Hello.
I'm Rich,
I'm Lauren.
and we are back with the series' last episode, which is about. I know, but it's important. It's about checking out. It's checking out at the end of the whole cycle. What should you be looking forward to? What should you be expecting? And how does it work? You've got into therapy. You've done a bit of therapy. It's threw everything upside down, inside out, in a safe manner, and now your time to get off the ride.
Yes.
So, the big question is, when you are ready versus when your therapist is ready for it to end.
Yeah.
Because I think that's two very different things. Because your therapist could feel like you have done the work that you needed to do, and it's maybe time to go and reflect a bit, or you've achieved what you needed to do. And it's more like not sort of like, what's the right word for it? It's almost like not. You go in there for reassurance rather than just.
Yeah, like you achieve what you set out to be here to do.
Yeah.
Like you coming here any further is kind of, let's talk about that. Is it anxiety of being, you've enjoyed this person and this person has been your constant cheerleader and you felt like you finally found someone that understands you, listens to you, but if you came here for a reason and the reason is now resolved, like
that's the work done, isn't it?
Yeah, and if that was the original contract and if that's what you had decided to work on and that issue has been resolved, then there is a moment where you kind of have to be like a baby duck set free and kind of
that's what I mean, like off you go, like it's like a pit stop, isn't it? It's going to retune you and then off you go, back out and at it.
Yeah, and the same thing is like when your broken leg is healed, you don't need crutches anymore. Like you got to go to physical therapy and you got to figure it out and eventually you will walk again. And it's like, trust. If the therapist has done their job right to prepare you for the ending, you should be able to trust yourself and trust in their faith in you that it will be all right.
Right, yeah, and that can be a scary thing when it's like...
Oh, absolutely.
Especially if you've got the anxiety going, oh no, I don't know if I can do it, I don't know if I can do it. A bit like what you're saying, like walking without the crutches anymore, or ice skating without touching the sides anymore, or doing the bowling without doing the buffers. Yeah. It's like, it's uncomfortable, but it's like, the person's not going to put you in a situation that you won't thrive in, that you won't.
Exactly, and I think that's a very different. When the client decides to end it, it could be a positive thing, like, okay, like I feel like I've done everything I need to do. I'm feeling good about it, and the therapist may or may not agree with that. I mean, that's fine.
Yes.
But at the same time, we respect the client's autonomy to make the best decision for them. But there are also times when clients have terminated against sort of
against advice.
Interest for them. I don't know what the right word. You still have concerns for them, but at the same time, you have to trust them.
Yeah.
We have to trust that they know what they're doing and trust that they are in the best frame of mind to make that decision to terminate. Or with knowing that they can come back at any time. I think that's the extra bit.
Yes, that is true. But then it depends how you've engaged in the service. If it's been through insurance or it's been through work and you've got a set number, it's kind of like out of your guys' hands. But what would you say some of the most like key reasons why a client would want to stop coming. Like we've talked about a healthy way of turning up, and it's like actually, thank you for everything we've done in the sessions. I've done my 6 sessions. That's me. I'm away now. You've also got maybe not necessarily the healthiest
Yes.
things when it's
I
like avoiding the last session.
Yeah, so I've had that where clients we've prepared for it, we know it's coming, we've talked about it several sessions beforehand, especially if I've worked with this person for a while, and they just don't show up. And as frustrating as that can be for a therapist, right, because we all love a good closure session, it's obviously what the person needed to do, or they were too afraid to kind of close that relationship. I think by not going, maybe there's this weird part that's like leaving it open-ended, or I don't want to say goodbye to you. You know, it's so loaded with so many reasons why. Maybe they're an avoidant person, maybe they just don't like goodbyes, maybe they don't want it to be over, maybe something happened to them, you know, all of these things. And it's really hard at times, especially if you connected with that client, to have that lack of closure. And you have to find ways, I think, to process that yourself and put it away.
Yeah, I mean, I bring it up because I have also done that as a client. I have done that as a client. I had,
of course you have.
of course I have. And it's very strange being on this side of the fence where you're like, oh right. And this was a really good therapist. This was like, she did over the 2-year course that we had doing that training. You had to have like so many hours. Personal therapy is part and parcel of it, so you had to have these hours. And I did half in the first year, and then the majority, just less than half in the first year, and the rest of it in the second year. And this therapist was great. I really connected with him. It was very much like doing everything else. We got on really well, and I did a couple of nearly 12 sessions or something, 15 sessions. And again, it was coming to that closure bit, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It was more to do with, I think, at the time when it was going through a lot of bereavement and loss, and it was more to do with because I had such a positive relationship in that way with the therapist. I was just, I couldn't say goodbye to another. It was that not being able to say goodbye to another loss. I mean, I did message them and say I'm so sorry I can't make this session, but I never rescheduled. I just couldn't. It was something. So it's weird having experienced it, and I couldn't for the life of me at the time. I mean, I've now understood why I was doing what I was doing. At the time, I didn't know what that was, why I was doing it, and it was it took me by surprise, which is really weird. And then I felt that embarrassment and then guilt, and oh my god, I've let them down, and all that other weird sort of people pleasing stuff that I've given up now, and so now I kind of understand it the other way around as a therapist, and having had clients where you've worked so many times and then they don't make that last session. I find it, like as you're saying, a bit unsettling, because I'd hate to think, was the last session, some of the things that I would think about is that in the last session, did I push too much? Was it too, did we go over something,
yeah,
that kind of thing. But what can you do? I suppose it's just one of them things. It's just
I think being the type of person I am, I have to have that end. It has to be a hard line. It has to be, as a client, not as a therapist. As a client, I knew with my therapist that I was essentially, emigrating, right? I left the country, and even though I still think about her from time to time, God, I could probably use a session, and I don't know how that would work now, and I'm pretty sure it would probably be over Zoom or something like that, but I had to wrap it all up. I had to go, and I think there may have even been a couple of just ending, because we're together such a long time, off and on over the years, and I knew that if I did come back, it wouldn't be for a significant amount of time. And even thinking now in the last 5 years how much has happened in my life, I could probably see her for another 10 years and not even cover half the stuff that's gone on. But
yeah.
I see the pros and cons of needing endings. I think if you can allow yourself to experience that ending, it is a really important part of therapy to have full sort of restoration of your trust in yourself and belief in yourself, and knowing that it was never that person that made those changes, it was you. And to feel fully restored in yourself that you've got this, right? Like, we're always going to be here, but you don't need us anymore. Like,
It's true.
You have gone through rehab, right? You have gone through emotional rehab, and you are finally able to walk without crutches, or, you know, swim without flotation devices, whatever accommodation you can think of. And that's the beauty of therapy, is being able to step out again. Therapy is not supposed to build another support in where you need this person for the rest of your life. Like, that's not what it's supposed to be. That's enabling and codependent, and it's not. Therapy is there to help you with what's happening in the moment, not a lifelong crutch where, you know. And when you're doing short-term work, I think it's, and this is just from experience, that the endings are a little bit easier when you're doing short-term work, like 6, 8, 12 weeks. And even in those times, you can fully connect with somebody, but it's less of a pull, I think, in terms of how much time you spent with somebody. Especially if it's an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks or even monthly. That's really only 12 times you've met that person. But when you're getting into, I group every week with this person for 6 months, or, you know, I spent, like me, a decade with a person on and off throughout difficult points in my life, it really becomes, like you said, a very difficult time to step away from those people, because they become the voice in your head. They become I'll just take it to therapy. You know what I mean? There's a lot of this, like, I'll just make it to next week. I could just make it to Wednesday. Like, I'm going to tell so-and-so all of this stuff that's going on, and everything will be okay. So.
And I have to say, that was like, it appeared in my life where, I have to say this, there's counseling training I've never experienced in my life, where not only what you're learning is then being applied to how you would apply it, and then also in practice, but then you're also mapping what you're learning onto your own situation.
Oh, God,
even
yeah.
though, because it's natural to then, like, assimilate that information. So then I felt like all of these parts of my life were turning at the same time. So when I felt some kind of way about something, I didn't even know where it was coming from, because everything was turning at the same time. And then I was getting this therapy, and the therapy was about going under the hood. Let's explore. Let's go to the deeper levels that you've not done for a long time. So it was very important work, and I just.
And we were
special place in my heart, I think, for them, both the therapists that I had over that period. Huge.
And we trained at the same time, and very different training modalities, very different experiences, but similar issues in terms of letting things go, processing things, reorganizing things. And that I definitely felt stripped down and exposed, and there were areas of my life I didn't even know needed to be looked at. And I think you're absolutely right. I think when you're in those periods of your life, not just counseling training, but anything where you feel incredibly vulnerable, to then have to go and connect with somebody else really does put those people in a special place. Like, I am a therapist because of my relationship with my therapist, right? She had changed my life, and I put the work in and I made those changes, but without her connection and her there's no other way to say, like, tolerating my ass, like, you know what I mean, like, having the compassion for me and helping me build self-empathy and helping me understand what was happening, and, like, just being that Switzerland safe space.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was life-altering, and I think I completely understand why you would avoid that last session. I really do. But it's also really beneficial for you as a client to go through that ending process in a safe and supported environment where it's not traumatizing. And we're going to talk about how it's traumatizing in a second.
Because it's almost like, I would picture, this is how I always map back to an airport at some point, but it's like going through the whole terminal of an airport, and you in that little, you've gone through security, so you know, in a little safe bubble, and then it's like having to go out through arrivals and into the world again. That's what it feels
Mm-hmm.
like. And I understand the temptation of like, no, I've got into this nice little safe bubble.
Yes.
Now I'm gonna stay here. But you can't stay there because it's like everything's expensive, and you have to get through that door and just be on the other side of that and see what that looks like again and explore that new world that you've just arrived at.
And I think that's a really important point because like the conditions that we offer as therapists don't exist in the capacity that they exist anywhere else. So like,
yeah,
it is real. Therapy is very real, but the conditions aren't. Like your mum, your grandma, your aunt, your cousin is not going to offer you the same unconditional relationship that we offer you as therapy. In that room, there's a sacred space, and nothing can touch it because we're not connected to you in any way, right? Like we're not your boyfriend, cousin, aunt, uncle, dog sitter, like. And
you
I
haven't
think
got a vested interest, like a point of view, like an agenda, something like, well, although you're saying that, but if you like, there's no consequence to what you're saying in terms of like, it doesn't impact us, or we haven't got a vested interest in one outcome or the other. We're just there to help you get through what you need to get through. So yeah.
So the longer that goes on, the more dependent people can become for it. Like, well, no one else understands me. Well, are you giving them a chance to? Like, you can't hold your relationships up to your therapist, right? That's not. We are taught to create. You know, we are taught and we believe in what we offer our clients. So, like, that's not fair. You can't expect your cut on the knee to be treated by your parent like it would do an EMT.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or a paramedic. Like, it's just not going to be the same. And to expect the same is you're setting them up for failure. So I think endings are so hard, but also incredible growth can happen from endings. Yeah. Unless you're you and me. And your supervisor / therapist suddenly dies.
Oh, yeah. That. I mean,
now,
how many times have we seen her? This is our first. This is our first clinical supervisor, and it was also in an organization that was around bereavement. You could make this up. Around bereavement, our first clinical supervisor outside thing, and our first placement. We've only been a couple of sessions in, and I think we met her twice? Twice?
Maybe 3 times, I think.
And then
she was fabulous. Like, I think we were very lucky to get her. She was very high up in that organization. She clearly knew her stuff. Whip smart, shrewd, very funny. And I think going in, because we would go into people's houses to offer therapeutic services and for supervision, we were required to go to hers. And this training was not easy by any means. That training was brutal. I am forever grateful for it. It definitely helped me cut my teeth with grief. But she died suddenly and without warning. And I remember the last session we were with her, she was a little bit off her game. Like a little bit all over the place, like forgot that we were coming. Was there another person in our group? No, it was just me and you.
Yeah.
Oh, there was? And I remember, I don't know if you know this about me, but rarely am I speechless. But just being completely bewildered. Like, I don't know what to do with this information. What do you mean she died? Like,
it was like, I think in my head I was like, of course she has. Of course she has. This is of course she had died.
And it caused a odd feeling of like, you have random thoughts like, well, who's going to take supervision? Like, what does that mean for because our courses were very specific. If you missed time, that affected your graduating date. Like, it was very tied up in our whole lives at the time.
Yeah.
Like, because of the courses and working full time and all those other things that came along with it. But
and because the organization was very close in it as well. So again, it was almost like, because she was so senior and high up and was well known and held a lot of it together, because she died, it was almost like witnessing, almost for us, it was almost like that was a surrogate family in a weird sort of way, and then we were watching them deal with a significant death within an organization dealt with helping others around significant death. So it was the very snake eating its tail moment.
Yeah.
You know?
And I remember, I mean, we were students at the time, right?
Yeah.
And 10 years
Right.
younger, 10 years younger
Yeah.
version of me was an entirely different person. And
Yes.
not being able to understand how an organization built on dealing with grief could not manage the loss, the grief, the ending, what to do about it, where we were left, right? Like, and I remember thinking, like, well, what about the clients? Because she had clients too. And like, has someone, weeks went by and I'm like, has somebody contacted the clients? Like, do we need to fill in? Like, what do they know what's happening? And it was just chaotic. And I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel stable. Like, I mean, mentally I felt stable, but like stable within our positions in terms of like, how am I going to go out and deal with clients' grief if the organization is essentially crumbling underneath our feet? Yep. She was the top of the triangle. She was a pinnacle member of that organization, and I think a lot of them had grew up in that organization with her, so that when she did, it was like a matriarch.
It was a big deal.
Yeah. And she was lovely, and I was really sad for a while and kind of like, well, where does this leave me? And like, personally, like, do I want to deal with this? Like, oh yeah, I've forgotten that death sucks, you know, like, and it wasn't handled very well. And we kind of got chopped in with another supervisor who begrudged us. That's my experience of that.
It was a very choice relationship, I remember. For me.
But that happens too, in terms of like, okay, let's say your therapist does die. It happens, right? Some people have been in their job for a long time. Some people are not well. What happens when you get dumped? Because that's how it feels, get dumped with somebody else. It completely affects your train of treatment. It completely affects, like, so not only are you dealing with the chaos that you came in with, but now add that you've lost that one person that you felt like got you. What are you supposed to do with that?
It's hard, but and I have to admit, there's a very distinct difference between losing a therapist and being referred on because they haven't got the skills, the competencies. They're being referred on is a different thing. Because that's part of finding the right fit.
Yes, and that therapist should have prepared you to move on, right? Like, and been very open and very honest with you about the limitations of that skill set. And it's never a bad thing for a client to, for a therapist to refer you on, like that, as that shows clinical awareness. Like, hey, like, I think someone can help you much better than I can. Before you get too deep to then feel like your therapist is getting rid of you, right? Like, do you know what I mean? That would be awful to,
because you've taken the time to let your defenses down, allow that trust in, and then it's almost like the ultimate rejection. Because it's a different thing when someone rejects you with your shields up, because they're just attacking the outer wall. But now I've let my shields down, and you see the part of the real me, and then you're going to reject me on that. Get out of here! It's not gonna feel.
No. And a lot of clients aren't successful after that because they do feel betrayed, or feel like, quote unquote, their problems are too much, right? They're too much. Those referrals should be made easy early on and swiftly. They shouldn't be lingering, or they shouldn't be fumbling about making it. No. And I think that kind of leads us to our feedback. Like, why, when, and how. So there's two parts, I think, to the feedback. One is, how do you give your therapist feedback towards the end of this? You know, you shouldn't just kind of take the ending and be like, okay, thanks, you were awesome. If they weren't, or if you felt like, hey, you know, like, we need to, you know what I mean? Like, I felt like your sign-up process was really difficult, or, you know what I mean? Like, there should be an opportunity for you to give some feedback. But we also have feedback to share from our chats.
We do. Let me get some of them up. So, we have Elle from London, and they were saying the anxieties one is interesting. Your podcast would have helped me, 20-year-old me, which I think is really sweet. What other ones have we got? We've got S from Basingstoke, and they've said they've just done out attachment styles, and they're both fearful of avoiding. And it was a very interesting thing that they've decided to look up, and they found it really interesting, which I think is amazing.
That is amazing, because it is really difficult to not only recognize that there might be a problem or that you hear some similarities in some of the stuff that we've talked about, but to also go and do something about it. Like, that's a big step too.
Exactly. And we've got another one. Elle from Southampton said they've done the love language quiz this morning and agree so much with what you were saying and don't think you can ever learn enough about yourself and how to communicate your needs. I think that was really sweet. The fact that people are not only doing it, but they're actually finding out about themselves and enjoying finding out about it and understand it, in a knowledge. You had one, I think. Didn't you have one?
Yes, M from Southampton had said that they really love listening to the podcast, and they wanted to know when we were bringing out a book.
Which it can happen. Will happen. I think it will happen at some point.
They said they love the ideas, our quotes, and they love the quote about the boat. I'm guessing that's about keeping one foot in the boat and not jumping in.
Yeah. Got H from Winchester. It said, love listening to the podcast, have lots of mixed feelings and emotions that are coming up. You come across perfectly well, and they love how brave we are to share what we do share, and I think that's really sweet.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've also got L from London as well. Did the quiz. Love hearing your voice. Hope you're good. So that's really sweet as well.
Yeah, and we love hearing your feedback, because I think we have these conversations. I mean, we've been friends a long time. Like, we have these conversations all the time, and it's just lovely to hear that our witterings, chat, musings are putting the world to rights theory. You know what I mean? Resonated with some people, and that they got something from that, and that's just so wonderful. And the population I work with, you don't always get feedback, and if you do, it can be kind of rude sometimes, because they're dealing with what they're dealing with. But just hearing how, or even just like signposting somebody to a quiz and being like, hey, like, I wonder what it would be like if you did this, or empowering people to be like, no, like, it is okay to shop around. It is important that you own this process. And so thank you all for your wonderful feedback. It does make our day.
It does, 100%. Do pop us a message if you're on Instagram. It's not you .podcast1@gmail.com as well. So I think it's exactly the same for Instagram. It's not you .podcast1. You can send a message on there, send us one through Gmail, and I think, fingers crossed, we're looking at going over to YouTube permanently and doing a more visual alongside it for our next series.
Yes, you can see our delightful faces. And I think this is the end of this series. So this is kind of wraps up all of our beginning, middle, and end of searching out a therapist, finding one, the process of therapy, and kind of where you're at. So I think the topics are going to be a little bit more individual, or kind of one or two-parters rather than length of series, so that those people with a shorter attention span, I think, would benefit from this kind of snippets of information rather than have longer periods of chats. But
it could be a mix. I mean, it could be a mix. It could be some longer ones, shorter ones. Depends.
But email us, message us if there's something specifically you would like us to cover or talk about. If there's something, if you want to send us an issue, and we can't, like I said, we can't give you therapy, we would never give you advice, but maybe somebody else might be going through something similar.
Or we could talk through some things to think about when you're looking at that issue. Yeah, for sure. All right. Until next time, keep yourself safe and look after each other. Bye for me.
Bye.